"This is my mother. Why is her photo here?" The silence that followed Maya's trembling voice was thick, almost suffocating. She stood in the center of the grand study room, her fingers still gripping the silver frame as if letting go would shatter whatever fragile explanation might come. The photo inside, weathered by time but unmistakable, was of Lucille Williams, her mother, decades younger, smiling in a crisp white nurse's uniform. She shouldn't have been here. No one should. This room was forbidden. Maya had learned that her first week at the Whitmore estate. House rule number 1, repeated sternly by Mrs. Whitby, the head housekeeper. No staff enters the portrait room, ever. Not to dust, not to organize, not for any reason. Everyone obeyed. Fear did that, and the paycheck's good ones kept mouths shut and eyes lowered. But that afternoon, as Maya hauled linens down the second-floor hallway, a gust of wind burst through an open window, slamming a heavy oak door wide open. The portrait room, the forbidden room. Curiosity tugged at her, then the photo caught her eye. 1 step, 2, and then she was standing inside, staring at her mother's face from decades before, framed in gold and hung among senators, inventors, military heroes, icons. Her mother didn't belong in this world. A black nurse from Raleigh, in a billionaire's private hall of legacy? Nothing about it made sense, until footsteps thundered behind her. "What in God's name are you doing?" Mrs. Whitby shrieked, her voice slicing through the quiet like broken glass. The woman's heels clicked sharply on the marble floor as she stormed forward. "You filthy little—" Maya turned, heart racing. "Mrs. Whitby, you were stealing." The housekeeper's eyes burned with fury and something uglier beneath a disdain Maya had felt but never heard spoken. "I knew it. You people always try something eventually." Maya's stomach dropped. "I wasn't stealing. This picture." Before she could finish, Whitby slapped her hand away from the frame, nails raking across Maya's knuckles. Pain shot up her wrist. "Don't touch anything in this house unless told," Whitby hissed. "You think you can walk in here, snoop through Mr. Whitmore's private memories, and take whatever you please? I didn't take anything." Maya stepped back, voice shaking. "I swear The housekeeper shoved her shoulder hard. Maya stumbled against the wall, her elbow striking a gilded sconce. A sharp sting spread through her arm. "Thief!" Whitby barked. "I'll have security drag you out of here in handcuffs. Let's see how long you last out there with a record and that sick mother of yours." Maya froze, breath ripped from her chest. Not her mother, not that. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Whitby leaned in close, breath sour with anger. "You saw opportunity in a rich man's house and took it. Trash always does." Maya felt heat behind her eyes, not from rage, but humiliation. Old, familiar, bitter humiliation. "Mrs. Whitby," she said, voice trembling, "I didn't steal. I was walking by and this picture. Why is my mother—" "What nonsense now?" Whitby scoffed. "Your mother? As if someone like her would ever belong in a place like this." She grabbed Maya's wrist roughly, pulling her toward the hallway. "You're done here. Stop." The voice came from the doorway, deep and commanding. Both women turned. Charles Whitmore stood there, framed by the window's winter light like some stern figure carved from marble. His silvered hair, crisp wool sweater, and cane gave him an air of dignity and gravity, an American titan in his private fortress. Whitby straightened instantly. "Mr. Whitmore, sir, I caught her stealing." "She wasn't stealing." His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced everything. Even the air seemed to still. Whitby opened her mouth, but one cold glance from him shut it again. She dropped Maya's wrist, stepping back in stiff retreat. Charles's attention shifted to Maya, lingering not on her uniform, nor the scuff on her sleeve, but on the way she clutched her arm, red and swelling. His brow tightened concern, maybe, or confusion. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Maya swallowed. "I found this room open. I was carrying linens, and the door—" She went snooping, Whitby cut in sharply. "And she touched things she shouldn't. You know the rules. Staff never enter this room. She violated your trust." Charles ignored her. His gaze settled on the photo now resting on the table, and something in his face shifted. Pain, memory, loss. It washed over him like a tide. Maya lifted the frame again, voice raw. "This is my mother. Why is her photo here?" It was then Charles's cane slipped slightly in his hand, his grip faltering. His expression emptied, no, not emptied. Cracked. Something long buried and long mourned flickered behind his eyes. He didn't answer. "Maya," he said instead, voice gravel, soft, "please, sit down. I haven't seen that face in 30 years, he murmured. The room felt heavier than moments before. Whitby stiffened, eyes darting. She opened her mouth again, maybe to defend herself, maybe to attack, but Charles raised a hand. "Leave us now." "But..." "Now." Whitby stiffened, swallowed, and left. The door shut behind her with a quiet thud, and in the stillness, the billionaire and the housemaid faced each other not as employer and staff, but as two lives about to collide with the weight of a past neither fully understood. Charles's voice trembled with memory. "Your mother saved my life, and I failed hers." Maya held the frame tighter, pain burning in her scraped knuckles, heart pounding in a rhythm she didn't choose. She had stumbled into a forbidden room, but the truth inside it had been waiting for her, and it wasn't finished speaking yet. If this moment touched you, hit like and comment where you're watching from. You might just find someone nearby watching with you. Maya didn't sit. Not because she was defiant, but because her knees were locked. Her body too tense to move. Her fingers still gripped the silver frame, the image of her mother smiling from decades ago fixed like a question mark between them. Charles remained standing too, his hand resting lightly on the head of his cane, as if he didn't fully trust the floor beneath him. He studied Maya's face, as though searching for something familiar, but what he saw there wasn't what he expected. There was no reverence, no awe, just confusion, guarded anger, and a deep wound just beginning to split open. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "You think?" Maya's voice was sharper than she intended. The sting from her wrist, the humiliation, the rawness of seeing her mother's face where it didn't belong, all of it boiled beneath the surface. "You've had her picture hidden in your private room, behind locked doors, and when I find it, your staff assaults me and accuses me of theft. And now you want to talk?" Charles didn't flinch. If anything, her fury seemed to ground him. "I didn't know she was still alive," he said. Maya's chest tightened. "You knew her?" He nodded, slowly. "Yes. Her name was Lucille. Lucille Williams. She was a nurse. Smart, kind. She had this calm strength. The kind you don't forget." His voice softened, like he was no longer speaking to Maya, but to the ghost of a memory. "She took care of me. After my accident." "What accident?" Maya's voice lowered, suspicious. "Car crash. North Carolina. 1995. I was 28. Fresh off a tech IPO. And drunk on ambition. I fell asleep at the wheel. Should have died. But I woke up in a small county hospital. Stitched together. And barely breathing. She was the one who sat with me every night." Maya felt something shift in her stomach. A flicker of something she didn't want to name. "She told me she worked in North Carolina," she murmured. "She never talked about it much. Just said she left." Charles nodded slowly. "We talked a lot. I was angry back then. Angry at the world. At myself. She was the first person who saw past all that. He trailed off. "You what?" He looked up at her, eyes aged with regret. "We fell in love. Quietly. Quickly. The kind of love you don't expect when your bones are still healing." Maya gripped the photo tighter. "Then why didn't you come back?" she asked, her voice hoarse. If it was love, why did she end up alone, raising a kid by herself and working double shifts to pay rent? The question struck like a whip. Charles turned away, walking slowly toward the fireplace. His cane tapped against the hardwood floor with soft, deliberate beats. "I was transferred to Europe. Internal bleeding. Emergency surgery in Geneva. The doctors didn't think I'd make it. By the time I recovered, months had passed. When I returned to the States, the hospital she worked at had shut down. No records, no forwarding address. She was gone." Maya's throat burned. "You didn't look harder?" "I did. For a while. But I didn't know her last name then. Only Lucille. She never talked much about her personal life. His voice dropped. She said she'd been hurt before, that people had taken advantage of her kindness. I didn't want to push. Maya turned away, swallowing down the ache in her chest. So you gave up, went back to your boardrooms and private jets and forgot about the woman who held your hand when you couldn't walk. No, Charles said. And for the first time, there was real emotion in his voice. I never forgot her. I never could. That photo is the only thing I took with me from that hospital. Maya looked down at it again, her mother's youthful face smiling back, unaware of the decades of silence that would follow. She had me a year later, Maya said. She never told me who my father was. Every time I asked, she'd change the subject. I thought she was ashamed. Charles turned back to her slowly, eyes wide. A year later? Yes. A silence fell between them. The only sound was the quiet tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Are you saying? He didn't finish the question. I'm not saying anything, Maya interrupted, setting the frame down with trembling fingers. I don't know. I'm not here for you. I'm here because I needed a job. I needed money to keep her in the nursing home that actually treats her like a human being. Charles looked shaken. Does she remember anything? She remembers her childhood, Maya said bitterly. She remembers how to hum gospel songs from her mother's kitchen. But anything after the accident? It's gone. Some days she doesn't even know my name. Charles took a slow breath, like a man about to walk into a storm. I want to help. No, Maya said, backing up. Don't make this worse. Don't pretend this is charity. This house, this life, it's a world my mother never belonged to, and neither do I. You may be my daughter. You may be a ghost, Maya shot back. A ghost that walked out before she ever had a chance to ask why. The weight of the room settled over both of them. Charles reached into the breast pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a small folded piece of yellowing paper. He held it out. What is that? She wrote me a letter, he said. One of the nurses gave it to me when I was leaving. I never opened it. I was afraid of what it might say. Maya stared at the paper, then at him. I want you to have it. She took it slowly, the edges soft from age, her fingers trembling. I need to go, she whispered. Maya, I'll finish out the week, she said quickly, avoiding his eyes. But after that, I'm gone. Charles didn't stop her, didn't call after her as she walked out, clutching the letter to her chest like it might burn her. Back in her small room in the staff quarters, Maya sat on the edge of her narrow bed, heart thudding like a hammer in her ears. The letter lay in her lap, still unopened. She stared at the envelope, her name not on it, but something else just as powerful, for Charles. Outside, snow began to fall harder against the window. Inside, the truth waited. The envelope was soft with age, edges curled, corners creased like it had been thumbed 100 times but never opened. In the dim light of her small room, Maya sat cross-legged on the bed, her mother's letter resting in her lap like something sacred or dangerous. For Charles, the front read in careful script. The ink had faded, but the intention still pulsed through it. She hesitated. This letter wasn't meant for her. It was a private relic of a past she didn't know. A past that had built a silence stretching decades. But she couldn't stop herself. She had to see what her mother had written. Maybe it would explain the gaps. Maybe it would explain everything. Her fingers tore gently along the seam. The letter inside was short. Dear Charles, if you're reading this, it means they let you leave in one piece. I pray every night that you'll walk again, that your mind will be clear, and that the world will still feel beautiful to you when you open your eyes. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't want to. I've lost people before, and I thought maybe this time, if I pretended it wasn't an ending, it wouldn't feel like one. You changed me, and I'm scared of what that means. I don't know what happens next. I only know that something inside me feels different. And it has nothing to do with medicine or fatigue. It has everything to do with that one night you said you saw me, not just the nurse. Not just the uniform. Me. If you come back, I'll be here. I'll be waiting. Lucie, Maya said in silence. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't dramatic. But there was something aching and raw in those lines, a woman who had opened herself to something bigger than her own fear. A woman who had let herself hope, and then been forgotten. Except she hadn't been. Charles had kept the letter all these years. Had kept the photo. Had built a private room to house memories no one else ever saw. Maya's throat tightened. That didn't make up for the lost time, or the years her mother had suffered in silence. But it meant something, didn't it? She folded the letter slowly, deliberately, her fingers brushing each crease. Then she slipped it into the small drawer beside her bed. For now, that was where the past would stay. The next morning, the estate was blanketed in white. Fresh snow clung to the pine trees that lined the long drive, and the wind whistled faintly through the gaps in the old windows. Maya stepped into the kitchen, still sore from the fall Whitby had caused. Her wrist throbbed faintly, but she wore a long sleeve to hide the bruise. She had no interest in starting a war with the woman who ran the household like a small, bitter kingdom. "Morning," muttered Lionel, the groundskeeper, nodding as he poured himself coffee. He was one of the few staff who didn't treat her like she carried a disease. Quiet man, white, maybe 65, smelled of tobacco and pine needles. He didn't ask questions, and Maya appreciated that. She offered him a small smile, then grabbed her thermos of hot tea and slipped back toward the east wing. She didn't go near the portrait room. Not yet. Instead, she went to her usual tasks: dusting, laundry, wiping down glass cases filled with things no one used. Her mind was only half present, her thoughts drifting back to that letter, to the image of Charles staring at her like he was seeing something he'd lost. Before lunch, Charles summoned her to the library. He was seated again in the same chair as before, though today he looked paler, more tired. His hands trembled faintly, the cane resting against his knee. Maya stood near the doorway, unsure of what to say. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice low. Maya didn't speak. "I was young and foolish, but not heartless." He looked at her carefully. "If I had known about you, if I had even guessed, I would have moved heaven and earth." "I don't need saving," Maya said quietly. "I needed the truth. I know, and I think you deserve to hear it all." He gestured to the chair across from him. Reluctantly, "She's Saturday." Charles laced his fingers. "After Geneva, I tried to return. But my father had taken over the company while I was recovering, and he wouldn't let me out of his grip. There were expectations. I was supposed to marry well, keep the legacy clean. A black nurse from North Carolina didn't fit the image." Maya's jaw clenched. "I'm not saying that to excuse anything," Charles added. "I'm saying it because I was a coward. I let fear and privilege build the wall between us." "And you hid behind it," Maya said. "Yes." He looked down. "But I never stopped wondering. Every hospital gala, every visit to North Carolina, I hoped I'd see her again. I even looked at nurses in New York, wondering if one of them might know her. But I didn't even know her full name, no address, just Lucille and the memory of her humming to me at night." Maya blinked hard. "She still hums." He looked up sharply. "She doesn't remember much, but sometimes when I visit her, she hums old songs, gospel mostly, and she cries even when she doesn't know why." Charles reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He placed it gently on the table between them. Maya stared. "I had this made after I left the hospital," he said. "I never knew why. Maybe I thought it would keep me tied to something real, but now I think it was meant for you." She opened the pouch and found a small locket, simple in gold, engraved with the initials L.W., her mother's initials. Inside, a tiny photograph, a younger Charles, smiling, and a woman's hand resting gently on his shoulder. Just the edge of a nurse's uniform was visible. Maya held it in silence. Something in her chest cracked open, soft but deep. "I want to help you," Charles said again. "With Lucille. With anything you need." Maya shook her head. "I don't want pity. It's not pity. It's something overdue." She looked at him, long and hard. "I'm not calling you Dad," she said. "I wouldn't expect you to. I'm not moving into your world. You already were part of it," he said quietly. "You just didn't know it." Maya stood, slipping the locket into her pocket. "I'm not staying past Friday." Charles nodded, though disappointment flickered across his face. As she turned to leave, he said, You remind me of her. Maya paused at the door. That's because I am her. She didn't look back. Outside, the snow had stopped. But the thaw was just beginning. The wind cut across the parking lot like a razor. Maya pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of the rideshare and stood in front of Street Helena's assisted living center, the brick building dusted with fresh snow. The sky above Vermont was a pale winter gray, soft and unforgiving, like memory itself. She inhaled deeply. Coming here always knotted her stomach. Only today, that knot felt sharper weighted with the letter in her bag, the locket in her pocket, and a truth she hadn't asked for but could no longer ignore. Inside, the air was warm and sweet with the faint scent of disinfectant and oatmeal. Old gospel music played on a small radio near the reception desk, the kind her mother hummed when words failed her. Maya checked in, her voice steady but her pulse racing. I'm here to see Lucille Williams. The receptionist smiled kindly. Down the hall, room 12. She's awake today. A good morning. Good mornings were rare, a soft blessing. Maya walked slowly, heels clicking down a hallway lined with faded paintings of forests and lakes attempts at peace. She passed an old man asleep in a wheelchair, head slumped, an elderly woman staring out the window like she was looking for someone she once knew and never found again. Room 12. Maya paused, gathered herself, and pushed the door open. Lucille sat in her armchair by the window, a knitted blanket around her legs, gray curls pulled into a loose bun. Her eyes were far away, following a flock of birds outside as they cut through the sky in a sharp formation. Hi, Mama, Maya whispered. Lucille turned slowly, her eyes searching, then softening. Recognition flickered. Not always, but today it was there. Baby girl, she murmured, voice thin but warm. There you are. Maya's heart eased, just a little. Yeah, here I am. She knelt beside her mother and rested her head gently against her knee. Lucille stroked her hair, the same tender motion she had used when Maya was a child and came home crying because the world was sharper to her, harsher to families like theirs. You look tired, Lucille said. It was a fragment of the woman she had been, a mother's instinct cutting through the fog. Long week, Maya whispered. She hesitated, then pulled out the locket. Mama, do you remember this? Lucille blinked. Confused at first. Then her lips parted. A sound escaped, not a word, but something like recognition mixed with a soft, aching surprise. Her fingers trembled as she touched the locket. I had one, like that, she whispered. It's yours, Maya said. He kept it. Lucille's brows knit. Who? Maya opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no gentle way to drop a lifetime of buried truth, so she changed her approach. The man from the hospital, Maya said softly. North Carolina, the one you cared for. Do you remember him? For a long time, there was only silence. Lucille's gaze drifted, searching the room as if memory floated somewhere just out of reach. Then her lips parted again. He was kind, she murmured. Sad eyes, alone even when people were there. A breath. I used to bring him coffee when he couldn't sleep. Maya swallowed hard. He remembered you, all these years. Lucille's eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. He left. The two words dropped like stones. No anger, just a wound that never fully closed. He didn't know, Maya whispered. He said, he didn't know how to find you. Lucille turned her gaze back to the window. People always leave. Maya's throat tightened. Not me. Lucille looked at her with a fragile, grateful sadness. My strong girl. Maya lowered her head. Strength felt like a curse as much as a blessing. Some burdens didn't make you noble. They just made you tired. A soft knock sounded. Nurse Gloria, a warm woman in her 60s with silver braids and eyes that seemed to see everything, peeked in. Maya, sweetheart, she said softly. I didn't know you'd be in today. Gloria stepped closer, smiling gently at Lucille, then at Maya. Your mama had a good morning, even sang a little. Old hymns. That's a blessing, Maya murmured. Gloria's gaze shifted to the locket. She remembers that, doesn't she? A little, Maya whispered. Enough. Gloria hesitated, then touched Maya's shoulder. There's someone else who remembers. Someone I think you should talk to. Maya tensed. Who? Anna Johnson, Gloria said. She worked with your mother. Same hospital. Same unit. She retired down in Burlington. She still talks about Lucy the Angel. Gloria's eyes softened. She might have pieces of the story you're looking for. Maya felt the ground shift under her, another thread pulling her backward, into the past she'd never been allowed to see. Thank you, she whispered. You deserve answers, Gloria murmured. Your mama deserves truth, too, even if she can't hold it long. Lucille hummed suddenly a low, soft gospel tune. Maya froze, breath-catching. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Not words, just melody. But to Maya, it was like a memory burning in the air. She leaned in, kissed her mother's forehead. I'll be right back. Rest, okay? Lucille nodded faintly, still humming, eyes distant but peaceful. Outside, as the wind bit at her cheeks again, Maya stood in the cold parking lot, letting the winter settle around her. The truth was unfolding, not like a gift, but like a wound peeling open to heal. She glanced toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, Charles Whitmore sat in a mansion full of ghosts. Somewhere out there, lies and love and fate tangled like roots under old soil. Maya pulled out the locket and closed her fingers around it. She wasn't leaving this story behind. Not yet. Because some answers don't wait. Some truths demand to be claimed. And some wounds ask to be closed. Finally, after years of silence. Snow clung stubbornly to Maya's boots as she stepped into the side entrance of the Whitmore estate, the one meant for staff. Her breath still held the chill from outside, and for a moment she just stood there, letting the warmth of the foyer try to thaw the complicated tightness in her chest. The house was quiet unnaturally so, even the usual bustle of staff seemed muted. Maybe they were avoiding her. Word traveled quickly among help, especially when scandal hovered like a storm cloud. Or maybe they were simply afraid. After all, Maya had violated the one rule no one dared to break. But she hadn't been fired, and that scared them more than if she had. Her wrist ached where Whitby had grabbed her. She tucked her hands into her pockets and exhaled slowly. The locket felt heavy and warm against her thigh, like a heartbeat. The letter rested in her bag, its presence whispering from the past. Maya. She turned. Mrs. Whitby stood in the archway to the corridor, posture stiff. Lips pursed so tightly they were nearly white. Her hair was pulled into its usual severe bun, and her voice clipped and polished held a barely disguised fury beneath its surface. You were supposed to be in laundry an hour ago. Maya kept her tone calm. I had to see my mother. Whitby's eyes hardened. Your personal affairs do not dictate this household schedule. Something inside Maya snapped not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet finality of a branch bearing too much snow. I'm still doing my job. Nah. Are you? Whitby's gaze flickered to Maya's sleeve, where the bruise likely hid beneath fabric. I saw you come in through the side door. Staff entrance. I expect you to continue using it. I have, Maya replied. Today, yesterday, every day before that. Whitby's jaw ticked. Do not think for a moment that your emotional displays yesterday have elevated your status. You are still staff here. Maya held her gaze. You hurt me. Whitby looked unimpressed. You're lucky you weren't dismissed on the spot. Consider yourself warned. Warned for what? Maya asked. Walking into a room with my mother's picture in it? Existing near something you couldn't control? Whitby's face flushed, rage simmering. You forget yourself. No, Maya whispered, stepping closer. I think, for the first time in my life, I'm remembering myself. Whitby leaned in, voice low. You don't belong here. And whatever game you're playing, whatever sympathy you've managed to manipulate out of Mr. Whitmore, it will end. Before Whitby could say more, a deep voice echoed from the hallway. Mrs. Whitby. She stiffened immediately. Charles stood at the end of the corridor, leaning on his cane but tall, steady. His eyes locked on the housekeeper with a quiet authority that could freeze wind. You will not speak to her like that again. Whitby swallowed. Sir. I was merely, you were overstepping, he replied, tone razor. Sharp. Kindness is not a weakness in this house. Neither is humanity. If you forget that again, you won't be here. Whitby paled. Yes, Mr. Whitmore. She dipped her head stiffly and walked away, her heels snapping across the tile. Maya stood still, unsure whether to thank him or walk past him entirely. Both felt precarious. Charles approached slowly, eyes scanning her face. "How is your mother?" Maya swallowed. She remembered something, or felt something. "I don't know." She pulled the locket from her pocket. She recognized this. Charles exhaled, a fragile sound. Then a part of her still remembers love. Maya didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she looked him directly in the eye. "I met someone at the home. A nurse who worked with her back then. She might know what happened. Why my mother left. Why she never contacted you." He nodded once, firmly. "What's her name?" "Anna Johnson. Burlington. I will help you find her." Maya stiffened. "I don't need you to do everything for me." "I know," he said softly. "But I need to do something. For her. For you." Maya hesitated. More than once in her life she had been offered help that turned out to be pity. To need someone was to risk being abandoned. To trust was to be left holding emptiness. But this felt different. Not safe. No, not that, but honest. Scary in a different way. "Let me come with you," he added. "When you talk to her." Maya blinked. "You don't have to." "I do," he said gently. "I owe both of you the truth." Her throat tightened. He wasn't playing savior. He wasn't pitying her. He was stepping into discomfort, shouldering weight he could have ignored. It didn't erase the past, but it meant something. "Okay," she said quietly. "But I'm driving." A corner of his mouth lifted in a small, surprised smile. "Fair enough." A soft warmth touched the room, tentative but real, something like the first crack of spring thaw beneath snow. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "I'll be ready." Maya nodded, turning to leave. But before she could take a step, his voice stopped her again. "Maya." She looked back. He wasn't a billionaire then. Not a legacy. Not power. Just a man with tired eyes and a hope so fragile it trembled. "Thank you for not walking away." She swallowed. "I haven't decided anything yet." "I know. I'm grateful anyway." Maya didn't answer. She turned and walked down the hallway, heart heavy but moving, step by step. One truth had opened a door. Another waited just ahead. Outside, the afternoon light slanted gold across the snow, melting the edges where shadow once held tight. Winter was still here, but it wasn't as cold as it had been. The drive to Burlington was silent for the first half hour. Charles sat in the passenger seat of Maya's used Toyota Corolla, the heat hissing softly from the dashboard vents. His gloved hands rested in his lap, one thumb absently brushing over the other. He wore a wool coat buttoned to the collar and a gray scarf knotted neatly at his throat. Outside the window, Vermont's countryside rolled past in white silence, bare trees, frozen fields, the occasional mailbox dusted with snow. Maya kept her eyes on the road, both hands on the steering wheel. Her coat was too thin for the cold, but she didn't complain. She wasn't sure what to say to the man beside her, this strange, rich, wounded man who might be her father, or might just be another man who had once loved her mother and walked away. "Have you been to Burlington before?" Charles asked finally, voice gentle. "A few times," she said. "Hospital runs, groceries when I could afford the gas." He nodded. "It's a beautiful town. My wife—" He paused, corrected himself. "My late wife loved it." Maya glanced at him. "You were married?" "For a time," he said. "No children, too much distance. She lived in California. I lived everywhere else." "Sounds lonely." It was. He looked out the window. "But not compared to losing someone before you had the chance to say what mattered." Maya didn't respond. Her fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. She had learned long ago that regret was like rust. It crept into places even silence couldn't hide. They reached the edge of Burlington just after 10. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the streets. Maya turned onto a quiet residential road lined with modest bungalows and tall evergreens. Gloria had given her the address over the phone, scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt now folded in her coat pocket. Anna Johnson lived in a white house with green shutters, a porch swing dusted with snow, and wind chimes that clinked gently in the morning breeze. Maya parked at the curb. They sat in the car for a moment, neither moving. "You ready?" she asked. Charles smiled faintly. "No." but that's never stopped me before. They stepped out into the cold. Maya led the way up the porch steps, boots crunching softly. She knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately. Anna Johnson was a small black woman in her 70s, with short silver hair, clear brown eyes, and a presence that filled the doorway like sunlight. She wore a cozy sweater and house slippers, and her expression shifted from curiosity to gentle recognition the moment she saw Maya. "You're Lucille's daughter," Anna said warmly. "You've got her eyes." Maya blinked in surprise. "You remember her?" "Child, I couldn't forget her if I tried." Anna opened the door wider. "Come in, both of you. I've made tea." The warmth inside the house was immediate and comforting, smelling faintly of cinnamon, lemon balm, and something familiar Maya couldn't place. Family, maybe. They followed Anna into a small living room filled with framed photos, knitted pillows, and a fireplace glowing with a quiet fire. Charles looked strangely small in the homey space, like a museum statue that had wandered into a grandmother's den. Anna poured tea into 3 mismatched mugs and settled into her armchair. "Now," she said, "tell me what brings you all the way out here on a Tuesday morning." Maya glanced at Charles, then back at Anna. "We found a picture of my mother. In his house. Hanging on the wall." Anna's eyebrows lifted slightly. She looked at Charles for a long, thoughtful moment. "You're Charles?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I remember you. Tall, quiet, sad. Lucille said you had eyes like a lake just before a storm." Charles gave a small, surprised laugh. "That sounds like her." She loved you," Anna said simply. "Did you love her back?" "Yes," he said, "but I left. I didn't mean to. I was taken overseas for surgery, and when I came back, the hospital was gone. I searched. I swear I did, but I couldn't find her." Anna nodded slowly. "Hospitals close, files vanish. Especially if the nurse in question was black and unmarried and pregnant." Maya's breath caught. Anna turned to her. "She told me about you. She was scared. Not of being a mother, but of being invisible. She had already lost jobs for speaking up. She didn't want to bring a child into a world that punished women like her for surviving." "She never told me any of that," Maya whispered. "She wouldn't," Anna said gently. "She wanted to protect you, not burden you with the weight she carried." Maya looked down into her tea. "She was so quiet sometimes. Like part of her had been sealed off." "It had," Anna said. "After she found out she was pregnant, she wrote letters. Said she hoped Charles would come back. She waited, but when no one came, she packed her bags and moved north. Started over. Got work where she could. But the hurt it stayed." Charles sat forward. "She never sent the letter." "No," Anna said, "but she read it out loud once. Said it was the only time she'd ever truly spoken her heart." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out the letter. "She gave it to a nurse," Charles said. "The day I left. I kept it all these years." Anna touched the paper gently. "Then some part of her reached you." After all, they sat in silence for a long moment. Finally Maya asked, "Why did she never tell me who he was?" Anna smiled sadly. "She didn't want you to grow up chasing something uncertain, and she didn't want you hating him if he'd truly never known." Maya looked at Charles, who was now studying the fire like it held answers the world had stolen from him. "She wanted you to be free," Anna said. "To write your own story." Maya swallowed. "But now that I know, what do I do with it?" Anna met her gaze. "Whatever brings peace. The truth doesn't always come with instructions." The tea had gone cold in Maya's hands, but she held the mug like it grounded her. The room was still, warm, full of quiet ghosts and unsaid words finally spoken. She hadn't expected peace here. She hadn't expected anything. But in the stillness of a stranger's living room, with the past laid bare and nothing left to hide, she felt something shift inside. Not closure, but maybe, just maybe, the beginning of healing. The sky had shifted to silver gray by the time Maya and Charles stepped back outside Anna Johnson's home. The clouds hung low over Burlington like a blanket refusing to lift. The world felt quieter now, as if the past had finally spoken and demanded silence in return. They walked to the car without speaking. Charles moved more slowly, his cane clicking against the icy walkway, his eyes distant. Maya unlocked the doors, slid into the driver's seat, and waited until he was settled beside her before starting the engine. Neither of them said a word as the car pulled away from the curb. For the first few minutes, the only sounds were the soft hum of tires over slush and the rattling heater trying to keep up with the cold. Maya's hands gripped the wheel at 10 and 2, as if posture could keep her upright emotionally. She finally broke the silence. "She didn't hate you." Charles looked over at her, surprised. "I thought maybe she would have." But Anna said she waited. Hoped. Even after everything. He exhaled, the sound thin. "That might be worse." Maya glanced at him. "Why?" "Because it means I let her down twice. Once by leaving, and again by never finding her." The car moved past snow-covered fields. A school bus passed them in the opposite direction, its windows fogged, silhouettes of children faintly visible inside. Maya's throat tightened. "I kept thinking," she said, "that maybe I wasn't wanted. That I was a mistake she couldn't explain. That's what silence does. It makes you fill in your own blanks." Charles turned in his seat slightly. "You were never a mistake. And certainly not unwanted. You didn't even know I existed." "No," he admitted. "But if I had." He didn't finish. "I think," Maya said slowly, "that my mother tried to erase a part of herself to protect me. But in doing that, she erased a part of me too." They drove in silence again, the weight of truth making even the windshield wipers sound louder than they should. When they reached the Whitmore estate, the sun was beginning to set, casting the snow in muted pinks and soft grays. Maya pulled the car into the staff lot out of habit, even though no one had dared assign her a space lately. As she stepped out, Charles hesitated. "I'd like to show you something," he said. Maya furrowed her brow. "Now? If you have time." After a moment's pause, she nodded. They walked side by side toward the main house, but instead of entering through the front, Charles led her along a gravel path behind the estate. It curved around a row of frost-covered hedges and toward a narrow greenhouse nestled beside the woods. Maya had never been here before. The staff rarely left their designated zones: kitchen, laundry, cleaning routes, places where footsteps were expected but not seen. Charles pushed open the door, and warm, moist air rolled out, wrapping them in earthy comfort. The smell of soil, citrus, and something floral filled the space. Inside, potted plants stretched along the glass walls: lemon trees, orchids, rosemary bushes. The winter chill had no place here. "My wife built this," Charles said, stepping in and looking around. She had no patience for people but endless patience for plants. Maya followed him in, blinking in the dim light. "You still keep it up?" "I try, or I pay someone who does. But I come here when I need to think." He walked to the back, where a small bench sat beneath a hanging fern. He motioned for Maya to sit. She hesitated but did. Charles sat beside her, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped. "I had a will drawn up 20 years ago. It outlines charitable donations, property divisions, the usual things men like me are expected to organize before we drop dead." Maya glanced sideways. "Is this your charming way of telling me I'm suddenly in it?" He gave a small, dry chuckle. "No, not yet." "Good," she muttered. He looked at her then, really looked. "I don't want to give you money, Maya. I want to give you something that was stolen from you. History. Identity. A name that belonged to someone who loved your mother." "Huh." Maya's body tensed. "What name?" "Mine." Silence. She stared ahead, jaw tight. "I'm not asking for anything today," Charles continued. "I know it's not simple. I know I didn't earn the right to just hand you a family name and pretend it fixes anything. But if there's even a chance you might want that connection, I want it to be your choice." Maya didn't speak for a long time. The greenhouse creaked gently in the wind. A lemon tree beside them shifted slightly, releasing a faint, sweet scent. "When I was a kid," she said finally, "I used to dream my real father would show up one day. Not because I wanted a dad, I had a mom, but because I thought if I knew where I came from, maybe the world would make a little more sense." She looked at him now, eyes tired but clear. "And now I know, and it doesn't make anything easier. It just makes it real." "I understand," he said. She stood slowly. "I don't want to be part of your name because you feel guilty." "I don't," he said quietly. "I feel responsible." Maya nodded. She walked to the lemon tree and touched a leaf gently between her fingers. "You keep this greenhouse alive," she murmured, "even though the person who planted it is gone." "Yes, then maybe you'll understand that I'm not ready." "Not yet." Charles gave a slow, respectful nod. "I'll wait." Maya glanced at him one last time. "You're good at waiting. Let's see if you're good at showing up." Then she walked out, leaving the warmth of the greenhouse behind her, into the cold air, where everything felt clearer, sharper, and full of new questions waiting just beneath the frost. The letter had been read, the locket worn, the names spoken aloud, but Maya still didn't know what she was supposed to feel. It was Wednesday morning, and she stood in front of the mirror in the staff quarters, pinning her hair back in a low bun. Her fingers moved automatically, twisting, smoothing, securing while her mind drifted like smoke. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the same woman who had arrived at the Whitmore estate 2 weeks ago. She still had the same tired eyes, the same skin darkened by long shifts and worry, the same quiet grit stitched into her shoulders, but something inside had shifted. Maybe it was anger softening into grief. Maybe it was confusion daring to look like clarity. Or maybe it was just exhaustion. Downstairs, the estate hummed with life. The Whitmore's weekend guests were scheduled to arrive, an old friend of Charles's from New York, and 2 investment partners coming in early for a private holiday dinner. That meant polish, silver trays, fresh linens, and more than the usual performance from the staff. Maya didn't want to perform anymore. She reached for the long-sleeve shirt that covered the faint bruise on her arm, courtesy of Mrs. Whitby, and tucked the edge into her waistband with care. She could have reported it, probably should have, but what would it have changed? The system wasn't built to hear women like her, not when the one doing the hurting wore pearls and held keys. Still, a part of her itched for justice, not the kind you get in courtrooms, but the kind you see in someone's eyes when they realize they've underestimated you for the last time. At 10:30, the main dining room came alive with motion. Staff moved like choreography. Napkins folded with military precision, polished glassware gleaming under the chandeliers. Maya was assigned to the sideboard today. Refill water, serve plates, stay silent. As she entered the dining room, she felt the tension ripple. Conversations slowed. She caught it the way 2 of the other maids paused, the way the head butler glanced at her, then quickly away. Something had changed. They knew. Not everything, but enough. Maya took her place, spine straight, jaw set. If they were going to stare, let them. She had walked through worse. At the far end of the table, Charles entered with his cane tapping lightly against the hardwood floor. He wore a dark suit, clean lines, no tie. His eyes flicked briefly toward her, not warm, not cold, but acknowledging. And something else, respect. She wasn't staff to him anymore. The guests arrived not long after. 3 men and 1 woman, all white, all perfectly pressed in wool coats and quiet money. Maya didn't need names. She recognized the type. One of the men, tall, mid-40s, expensive glasses, did a double take when he saw her, then leaned in to whisper something to Charles. Charles didn't laugh, didn't smile. Maya watched his lips form a reply she couldn't hear. Whatever he said, the man sat back in his chair a little too quickly. The dinner passed in waves, small talk, laughter, the dull, sharp edge of power being passed back and forth, like a bottle of fine wine. Maya moved silently through it, a ghost in black, her hands steady even when her stomach turned. She thought of her mother humming in that nursing home, unaware that the man she once loved now sat in the glow of chandeliers and crystal. She thought of the locket resting against her chest beneath her shirt. She thought of Anna's voice saying, "She didn't want you chasing something uncertain." And then came the test. The moment Richard Whitmore walked into the room. Maya hadn't seen him since the last Whitmore family photo in a magazine spread 2 years ago. Charles's nephew, the heir apparent, a man with a golden resume and a frozen smile. He wasn't expected today. He entered like he owned the room, despite never earning it. "Uncle Charles," Richard said smoothly, brushing snow from his coat and kissing the air near the woman guest's cheek. "Didn't realize we were having such a full house." Charles straightened slightly, smile tight. "Richard." Then Richard saw Maya, and paused. It was subtle, a flicker of something: confusion, calculation, and then recognition. "Well," he said, with a smile just too slow to be polite, Didn't realize the staff were joining us at the main table now. The room stilled. Maya turned slowly, calm as stone. She wasn't at the table. She hadn't spoken a word, but everyone heard the implication. Charles's voice cut in before she could answer. Maya works here, yes, but she is not your concern. Richard's brow lifted. Interesting phrasing. Maya didn't move. She felt the heat rise in her chest, but she held it down. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Then Charles did something unexpected. He stood. The room fell quiet. Everyone, he said calmly, thank you for being here. There's something I need to say. Maya froze. Not now. Not like this. But Charles's voice carried. This house has stood for nearly a century. It's weathered war, scandal, sickness, and success. But I've learned that the walls mean nothing if the people inside don't speak the truth. He looked at Maya. This is Maya Williams. She is the daughter of a woman I once loved deeply. A woman I lost through silence, and fear, and failure. And Maya may very well be my daughter. Gasps, not dramatic ones, more like sharp inhales. A dropped fork. The tension snapped like brittle glass. Richard's eyes darkened. Charles didn't flinch. I don't say this to shock you, he continued. I say it because this house will not carry one more generation of secrets built on silence. If you are uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave. Maya couldn't breathe. She didn't want to cry, not in this room, not in front of people who measured emotion like currency, but something in her chest cracked. Charles sat back down. No one left. Richard smiled a little too wide. That's quite the announcement. Charles poured himself water. It's not an announcement. It's a fact. Later, after the guests filtered out and the dining room emptied, Maya remained behind, stacking plates, wiping down silver. She didn't say a word as the staff moved awkwardly around her, not sure how to look at her now. As she reached for the last glass, a voice came from the doorway. You didn't ask for this, Charles said. Maya turned, expression unreadable. No, she replied, but I'm starting to think I was meant to hear it anyway. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe just a little that maybe this wasn't a story of being found. Maybe it was the story of choosing not to stay hidden anymore. The morning after the dinner, the estate was hushed in that particular way. Things get quiet after a storm, not because the storm passed, but because everyone was still measuring the damage. Maya rose early, not because she was needed, no one had summoned her, but because sleep had turned against her sometime around 3 a.m. She had tossed beneath the thin staff blankets, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, her mind spinning. She may very well be my daughter. Charles had said it aloud, in front of witnesses, in front of Richard. That was no small thing. That wasn't a whisper in the garden or a letter left unopened. It was real, spoken into the air with weight and consequence. And it hadn't taken long for that consequence to bloom. By the time she reached the kitchen, Lionel was waiting, his usual calm fractured by tension. Hey, he said, eyes darting to make sure no one else was around. You might want to stay out of the main house today. Maya raised a brow. Why? Richard called a meeting. Early this morning. Legal folks, and a few old board friends. You made waves last night. Maya grabbed a mug and poured herself coffee. No sugar, no cream, just bitter and hot. I didn't say a word, she said flatly. No, Lionel said. But Charles did. And people like Richard don't like surprises. Especially ones with inheritance implications. Maya froze with the mug halfway to her lips. I don't want anything from them, she said. Lionel leaned against the counter. Doesn't matter. In this world, people don't care what you want. They care what you might be entitled to. That's enough to make some of them scared. She sipped the coffee and stared out the kitchen window at the gray sky. The snow had stopped falling overnight, but it hadn't melted. It just lay there, undisturbed and watching, like everyone else in this damn house. She didn't go into the main house that day, but the letter did. By early afternoon, a manila envelope was hand-delivered to Charles's private study. Inside was a letter on thick stationery, penned by Richard's attorney. Lionel, ever the quiet messenger, had gotten a glimpse of it before the housekeeper snatched it away with a hiss. A formal concern regarding the mental capacity and decision-making ability of Mr. Charles Whitmore, Lionel recited later in a whisper. Given recent erratic behavior, emotional vulnerability, and questionable associations. Maya didn't need to ask who the questionable association was. Her stomach turned. They weren't wasting time. Late that afternoon, she stood outside by the greenhouse. Her breath rose in pale clouds. She wore gloves, a thick borrowed scarf, and the weight of someone who couldn't decide if she was trespassing or staking a claim. Charles joined her quietly, walking slower than usual. His breath labored. "Don't say it," he said, holding up a gloved hand. "I know what's coming. Richard is doing what he does best, playing chess with someone else's life." Maya turned toward him. "He thinks you've lost it, that I'm manipulating you." Charles looked at her. "Do you think you're manipulating me?" "No," she said, "but I don't think that matters." He smiled thinly. "Then you understand the family perfectly." "Mary." She took a step closer to the greenhouse door. "I don't want anything from you, Charles. I need you to hear that again. I didn't ask to be part of this world. I didn't even want this job. I took it because I couldn't afford my mother's medication. I know, but now I'm standing here, and people are saying I'm a threat. Because I exist. Because you matter," he corrected gently. "That's the real problem." They stepped inside the greenhouse, where the air was soft and humid, and smelled faintly of citrus and soil. Charles moved to the back bench and sat heavily. "Richard was raised with all the expectation and none of the accountability," he said. "He was told he'd inherit everything, that the world belonged to him. I fed that lie. I enabled it, because it was easier than raising questions." Maya folded her arms. "And now?" Charles looked at her. "Now I want to fix things." "One." She raised an eyebrow. "With another will?" "With the truth," he said simply. "With real change. Not the kind that looks good in magazines or donor walls. The kind that starts by looking someone in the eye and saying, 'I see you.'" Maya didn't respond. She sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth from the greenhouse lamps. "Do you want me to fight this?" he asked after a long moment. "Because I will, but I won't drag you into something if it'll cause more pain." Maya thought about that, and then, quietly, "If you back down, he wins. Not just the money, the story, the lie." Charles nodded slowly. She looked at him. "I'm not your mistake to hide anymore." "No," he said, voice thick, "you're not." There was a long silence. Finally, Maya asked, "Do you believe I'm your daughter?" Charles turned his face toward hers, soft lines etched by time and remorse. "I don't need a test to know what's already true." But she did. And the next morning, Maya called the hospital. A DNA test wasn't a demand. It was a reckoning. Because if this story was going to keep unfolding, she wanted the proof not for Richard, not for Charles,